If Rich only knew how often that happens. It is a real name, by the way, so. When Desdemona Watts married Clarence Wickersham Wacker, they didn't think it sounded all that funny. It's great when, you take the long view. It's not just the long view forward, it's also the long view backwards. George Bernard Shaw would be a good example of that, which they'll put up for us in a minute. I guess I'll read the quote along with you, or at least somewhat from memory, updating it for today's language. The reasonable person adopts themselves to the world. The unreasonable person insists on adopting the world to themselves. Therefore, all progress depends on the unreasonable. And given that we were coming to St. Louis, the second best sports town in America, M-E-T-S, Mets. I hate the Yankees, at least. How's that? It came to me that Mark Twain was a good, whack upside the head to start with, and Twain was the one who said, "History may not repeat itself, but it sure does rhyme." And there was sentiment in that in Rich's comments, and it made me think of something I was talking to Rich about, which is the last book I put up on my reading list. And I don't put on my reading list my favorite novels, although Herman Wouk is pretty fine by me. But this book is entitled Extraordinary Popular Delusions and the Madness of Crowds. Extraordinary Popular Delusions and the Madness of Crowds. And it was written in the preface, it says right there, about this thing called the New Economy. And then you keep going and you realize it was written in 1841. And of course, it was about a thing called a gold rush. So, a lot of the lessons, and I have 5 lessons I really want to share with us as I go through today, and I wanted to put it into the context as well as the fact that this is a technology forum, so I wanted to at least see some of the technological things I think may be of interest on the horizon. But to give us a sense of context, the 70s economic theory of rational expectation ran into the end of the 20th century's imperfect world, where suddenly we had cascading uncertainty, to the degree that I think that the only certainty today is truly uncertainty. Well, the first lesson from all of what's transpired in the last 12 months, to me, is one of the foundations of the American experience. And interesting to me, we're the only country in the world with the phrase, to make money. After all, it is the capitalist tool. Everyone else in the world gets paid. We create wealth. We make money. And the first lesson to me is that the whole underpinning of value and wealth creation, value formation and wealth creation, has taken on a whole lot of new flavors. That has not gone away. As a matter of fact, I was reading in just this morning's paper that while it's not technologically centric, I think it's a wonderful metaphor that in Britain, the British Post, the equivalent of the United States Post Office of Great Britain, has now allowed you to personalize your stamps. So you can get your picture, your kid's picture, your dog's picture were the 3 most common choices. And instead of getting stamps for 34 cents, they're $1 a pop. Whole new ways to create wealth. And this is spreading around the world. I mean, after all, Deng said to get rich is glorious. And everyone in the world is starting to recognize it's about creating wealth. By the way, just to make sure that we feel sensitive to our uncertainties, there are now 400 million English-speaking people in China. This is the first time in history where there's more English-speaking people in China than there are in North America. And obviously globalization follows, and of course any of us, even my little 7-person company, is a global operation. The collision of the new economics and the desire and the opportunity to create wealth has, for me, hit the point where the economy may have hit the point of becoming autocatalytic, where it's both the engine and the fuel. And I'm not so sure the world can ever have another Great Depression. Clearly, we're seeing that we can have bear markets, but of course you don't have a market unless you have a down. And the circumstance are that as we've cascaded towards what is becoming a $40 trillion economy, it is feeding itself to a degree that as the pie gets bigger, it's just a juggernaut unto itself. You know, in the last 10 years alone, $750 billion is simply parachuted into Seattle. It hasn't come from somewhere else. This is not geopolitical cannibalization or banking irregularities. It's wealth that heretofore could not have been made. And IT is the 13th trillion-dollar category in the world, the 13 representing, a little over half of the world's GDP, and it's the fastest one to ever get there. I don't think it's going away. Now, if we put the future times on top of this, we have things like economic theories, which I'm sure we'll talk about in the panel, if not in some of Brian's marks, like behavioral economics, suggesting that economics are all not just about your own concern, but in effect have some sense of reciprocity. We're going to see what is now called hyperbolic discounting. The fact that you change your orientation to a discount rate over different periods of time, and things like the second great lesson to me, which is the role of speculation. And I was reading between the lines of Rich's comments, but I think that this thing about the change in the nature of speculation will play an even greater role as we go forward. There's $1 trillion that clears the Fed today. There's $1 trillion that clears the Federal Reserve in New York City, metropolis center of the universe, the best sports town in America, every day. And just in case you wanted to know, we have George Marshall to thank for that. It was all his idea in the first place, the guy that Winston Churchill and Franklin Delano Roosevelt both said was the most impressive person they'd ever met in their life. Of that money that clears the Fed today, $150 billion is for the payment of goods and services, and $850 billion is purely speculation. Now, 70 years ago, that would have brought down this country's economic system. Today, it's a matter of course, and in my opinion, that $850 billion is nothing but someone who thinks they're smarter than you are, smarter than I am. And obviously, we know by the fact that we're here today that that's not true. It's a joke. I write this material, so you got to help me out. The future of economics, I think, will also include a great deal of fusion with other disciplines. And the biggest discipline that we should be prepared for is the fusion of economics with biology. There's only 4 relationships in an ecosystem: competitive, symbiotic, predatory, and parasitic. How interesting, there's only 4 relationships in an economy, the same 4. We're just now in all 4 of those with somebody at the same time. I have this little chart here, which I suddenly realized I needed the AT&T name, but look at these 6 companies: Microsoft, Disney, Time Warner, General Electric, AT&T, and the News Corp. And if I really looked at them and put a personality, besides the people of course, Gates and Jerry Levin, with my apologies to Ted Turner or anybody from AOL, to Michael Eisner, to Jack Welch with obviously his imminent retirement, to Rupert, to Malone. You had a software company, a theme park movie operator, a magazine syndicate, a financial service operator, which is what I guess General Electric's become, a long-distance cable provider, and a newspaper syndicate. But suddenly you look at them, and they're all in the cable business. They're all in the television and film production. They're all in technology, both as far as content and video interactive games. They're all in sports, 5 out of the 6 in satellites, in the print, broadcast, telecommunications, 4 out of the 6 in theme parks and music. And they start looking to me like they're the same company. And it gets so pervasive to me that I wonder if they're in competition or it's merely a giant web of collaboration. Well, let's start looking at the inner workings of this for just a minute. And of course, I'd always love to start with Microsoft. And Microsoft has 2 joint ventures going with General Electric, including MSNBC and a video-enhanced web server. And General Electric has quite a few going on with the News Corp, including B-Sky-B Australia, B-Sky-B South America. And then you add that News Corp has a joint venture coming over here to ABC, who also has a joint venture going with Microsoft as well as General Electric. We add there 2 to Time Warner, who also has 2 going with all of the other players listed here. And by the time we go ahead and provide the TCI connection, you see that there's now, I believe it's up to 11 joint ventures alone to the News Corp. Now, if I left this right here, it would be pretty complex, but we ought to go ahead and at least put in some of the peripheral players like, Jobs and Paul Allen and Comcast and Apple. And you know what? Before you look at this, before you know it, this is one company. I mean, Das Kapital may have been right. We end up with 2 companies in the world. It's just I don't know if it makes any difference if you can't own the means of production.